Hey now, Brawlers, I love deck builders because there's nothing better than playing a solitaire card game with multiple people. Well, okay, I think deck builders offer a lot more than that, and that's why I enjoy them. I love them so much that I did a top 10 list of them, and I think in my top 5, possibly my number 2, if I remember correctly, was Ascension, Chronicle of the Godslayer. This one really changed up the deck building formula early on, soon after Dominion, which was the grandfather of all deck building games, was released, and it changed it up by adding multiple types of currency, an ever-changing lineup of cards that was randomized, much to the chagrin of some gamers who liked the sort of methodical selection of cards that was available in Dominion. But I really enjoyed that. Ascension is a very simple game to learn, but there is some skill involved. I mean, someone who's really, really good at the game can crush someone who is less experienced at the game, but there's always that bit of randomness, so you always have a chance. And that's what I enjoy about the game. Now, there's been multiple expansions, and usually it happens in blocks. So it'll be a big box set that can be played with up to 4 players, and then there'll be a smaller expansion paired along with it that can only be played with 2 players, but you can mix and match 2 or more sets in order to play with up to 6 players. Don't ever do that. Too long. 5 and 6 players? No way. Way too long. But I digress. Now, the last set was really, really cool. The last block. You had Rise of Vigil and Darkness Unleashed, which Rise of Vigil introduced the treasure mechanic, which in that case was energy shards, which would give you a third type of currency, energy, which was really, really cool. And in the Darkness Unleashed mini expansion, they introduced transforming cards, which I really, really love, which meant that if you met a certain condition, you'd be able to transform one of the cards in your hand permanently into a better evolved card. Now, for the new set, which we're going to take a look at today, which is Realms Unraveled, they've kept the transform mechanic and add more to those, which is great news. I really love that, and they're really cool in this set. I'll just say that right now. But they also added a couple of new things that have to do specifically with factions. One of them is the idea of multi-faction cards. These are heroes and I think maybe constructs. Yeah, heroes and constructs, maybe. It might just be heroes, sorry, that belong to more than one faction. So you might have a hero that is both Lifebound and Mechana, or a hero that is both Void and Enlightened, and so on and so forth. And they count as both factions for special abilities, and the abilities of the cards will blend the themes of the 2 factions. So if it's Void and Enlightened, you might get to, say, draw a card, but also get to banish a card. Things like that. So that's a pretty neat concept. And finally, the other new thing that they add are multi-unite, which means that the more of a certain faction that you play, the more bonuses you're going to get. So I'm not going to go through an overview of the game, even though this is a base set, because I assume if you're watching this, you probably know how to play Ascension, or you already know about it. You just want to know what this one adds that the other ones don't. So I'm going to go over all the different new cards and new stuff that comes in this game. Then we're going to come back, and I'll give you my final opinion. Alright people, let's go ahead and take a brief look at the new stuff that comes in Realms Unraveled, the newest standalone expansion for Ascension. I'm not going to teach you how to play Ascension. You can go back and look at some of my older videos of the game in order to learn how to play, or you can just look at there's probably a much better tutorial than what I have. But this is just to show you the new stuff that comes in Realms Unraveled. Now this is a standalone set, so you can play it with up to 4 players, including a solo variant if you want, or you can mix it together with at least one other set in order to play it with up to 6 players, which I do not recommend. In any case, let's go through it. Now, first off, you have a new board, which is kind of cool. Like you'll hear in my final thoughts, the artwork has been improving steadily in Ascension, and I think the boards are looking better too. If you might not like this yellow-orange, but to each their own. Now, here's the new Cultist. Of course, you always have a Cultist in Ascension, and this is the newest one. Like I said, the artwork is much better than the old Cultist. New Mystic, new Heavy Infantry. This is all the normal stuff that comes in every set of Ascension. Just giving you a taste for the new theme of the artwork here. And also notice the new borders as well to set them apart from the other cards. So the white border indicates the starter cards, and the gray border is going to indicate cards that are not part of the center deck, but also not starter cards. I still don't know why they don't just print the Cultists on the board, but whatever. I guess it's not a huge deal. Now, let's look at some of the new cards from the center deck here. Now, the new thing about this set is the idea of multi-faction cards. Cards that belong to more than one of the main 4 factions. So whenever you're using a special ability, if you have one of those cards, it counts as both factions for those purposes. And the cards seem to be themed for both of the factions. So for instance, you have the Void Forged Paladin, which is an enlightened Void hero. You gain 2 combat, which the Void are usually known for. But also, the first time you defeat a monster in the center row, this turn you draw draw 2 cards, which is something that the Enlightened like to do a lot. The Deathbound Druid is a life-bound void hero that lets you gain honor, but you can also banish a card. The Nightmare Delver is a Mechana void hero. You gain runes, but if you control 2 or more constructs, you can banish a card. The Wild Gear Druid gives you runes and potentially honor if you have enough constructs. The Cannon Templar is an enlightened Mechana hero that is going to give you runes, but also combat. You may defeat a monster if the combat cost is less than or equal to the cost of a construct you control. The Matron of Discovery is a Mechana hero. Now, this is the start of the cards that are multi-unite. So these are cards that are just belong to a single faction, but the more of these cards you play of that faction, the stronger they'll get. So, Matron of Discovery, you gain 2 runes, but for every Mechana hero you play or other Mechana hero that you play or have played, you gain an additional rune. The Sage of Lucid Dreams. Once this turn, you can banish a card in your hand. If you do, you acquire a hero with honor value up to 1 more than that of the banished card and put it into your hand. And if you multi-unite, which is to say that you play more enlightened heroes, you get to do this multiple times. The Death Dealer Noble is much like that Mechana card I showed you, but this time it's for combat. You gain 2 and an additional 1 for every more void hero you play in addition to this one. The Black Watch Exemplar gives you 3, and you may also banish a card in your discard pile if you kick off the multi-unite. The Everbloom Click gives you honor, an increasing amount of honor for every lifebound that you play. Dartha the Eternal is one of these ultimate cards for 7 costs for the Enlightened faction. Reveal the top card of the center deck, acquire or defeat that card without paying its cost. If you multi-unite, you can repeat it. The more Enlightened heroes you play, the more cards you acquire or defeat. Cetra, Matron of the Stars, is the ultimate lifebound hero. Once this turn, acquire a hero without paying its cost. Put it on top of your deck. If you multi-unite, you repeat that effect. The Neophyte Mentor is kind of cool because you can draw a card just by playing him, but more importantly, the next Mystic or Heavy Infantry you play counts as a faction of your choice, which is very, very helpful in kicking off the other multi-unite cards. But of course, there's new monsters in the set as well. Here's just a few of the ones I thought were pretty cool. Sower of Discontent will give you 2 honor when you kill him, but if you name a faction, you can name a faction, you gain an additional honor for each hero of the faction you have played that turn. Sower of Betrayal is the same way, but you gain more honor. It's 3 and 2 this time, but of course he's harder to kill. And I like this one a lot, Terrorizing Fiends. You only gain 2 honor for killing him, and he's 4 combat, but you get to draw 2 cards. Always a better choice unless you're at the very end of the game. Even then, it's probably a better choice. And of course, there's more cards in the center deck, but those are just some of the coolest ones that I felt. And of course, the Transform mechanic is back from Darkness Unleashed. And I'll go ahead and show you the double-sided cards here, but of course, much like with Darkness Unleashed, you have another set of cards here that are single-sided if you choose not to play with sleeves, which I don't. But just for the simplicity's sake, here's the double-sided ones. Disciple of Cetra. If it's in your hand and you've played another Lifebound hero, you get to transform it. You normally gain 1 honor, 1 rune and 1 honor. In this case, you would gain 2 runes and 2 honor if you transform her. All Set Monk Prodigy. While it's in your hand, if you control 2 or more constructs, you transform him. He gains 3 runes normally. Now he regains 4. And when you acquire a construct, you may put it into play. I'm not going to show you all these. I'll show you some of the coolest ones. Veer the Ascetic Master. If you've played a hero of every faction, you can transform him into the Ephemeral Guru. Normally, you get to acquire a hero in the center row without paying its cost and put it into your hands. Now you can acquire all heroes in the center row without paying their costs and put them in your hand. That's pretty much game-changing right there. Borderland Mercenaries is one of the monsters you can kill that transforms. You kill him, you don't get any other kind of honor reward, but you transform him into Borderland Mercenary. And you get to draw a card, name a faction. This hero counts as a faction, as that faction this turn. It's another thing for helping to kick off your multi-unite powers. Let's see. Do love Void heroes, so here's Emery the Unmaker. While this is in your hand, if there are 8 or more monsters in the Void, transform this into Emery Demon's Bane. You gain 4 combat normally. In this case, you gain 5 combat and you can defeat monsters in the Void. That's pretty cool. And let's show you some of the constructs. We have the Initiate's Gauntlets, which if you have played 2 or more Void heroes, you can transform them into the Clutch of Darkness, which gives you 2 combat power on every one of your turns. And last one I'll show you, the second to last one I'll show you, Forgotten Scripture. If you play 2 or more Enlightened heroes, you can transform this into the Mantra of True Sight. Once per turn, you may draw a card, which is pretty freaking cool. The last one I'll show you is kind of every set now has its own little centerpiece card. In this case, it is Idayu the Tormented, the guy on the front of the box. If you defeat him for 7, the reward is that you get to transform him and acquire him, and that is Idayu the Serene. He counts as all factions, You gain 1 rune, 1 combat, 1 honor, and you get to draw a card. You can multi-unite. You gain 1 honor, or I'm sorry, 1 rune for each Mechanic hero, 1 combat for each Void hero, 1 honor for each Lifebound hero, and you draw a card for each Enlightened hero you play or have played this turn. That's pretty freaking cool. So that's most of the new stuff that came in Ascension, Realms Unraveled, more transform cards, the new multi-unite power, which is really cool, the new multi-faction powers, which are not as cool, but still pretty cool, and just more of the other type of cards that you know and love. Let's go to my final thoughts. It would have been tough for Stoneblade Entertainment to screw this up because more Ascension is always a good thing, and they definitely did not disappoint with this one. Not only is it more Ascension, but it's more unique Ascension. You have some really cool gameplay elements here. The return of transforming cards, while it was already introduced in Darkness Unleashed, I am glad to see that they're keeping up the trend. I think that mechanic can be in every expansion from here on out because it's very simple, it's very easy to add to the game, very simple to explain to newcomers, and yet, while it doesn't add a drastic amount of stuff to the game, it's just really, really cool. It's that idea of evolving cards is something I want to see in more deck builders. I think that Thunderstone does it in a certain different way with the leveling up of the heroes, but you know, Thunderstone is a much different kind of deck builder, is much more complicated, whereas Ascension is very simple, although there is some strategy there, and I think that they introduced the transforming, evolving cards in a very simple, straightforward way. The multi-faction cards are really cool too. I don't feel that this really does all that much with them. Obviously, they're cool cards, mixing together the different themes of the different factions, and having them count as different factions also helps with the multi-unite cards, which I'll get to in a second. But they don't feel like they're that game-changing. When I first saw the promotional artwork for the new set coming up, I'm like, whoa, cards from different factions, this is going to change everything. Well, it really didn't. I mean, they didn't change the game in such a drastic way that it felt like a whole new type of Ascension moving forward. But they're neat, and it almost feels like they could have been in the game from the beginning or from one of the early expansions, just because the idea of having multicolor cards, well, even in Magic the Gathering, they got that right, like, 18 years ago or whatever it is. So I do appreciate that they're in there, and it is cool. Doesn't change the game that much. Now, the multi-unite thing, that I like a lot, because multi-unite encourages you to have, let's say, brand loyalty. If you like a faction, if you like what they do for you, it encourages you to stick with that faction. Like, I've always liked the Void faction. I like the idea of banishing cards, making your deck more efficient, and I like killing monsters. So that really is the faction for me, and we'll get back to the artwork in a second, but I always thought that the theme and the art of those cards were sort of better than the others. So I like sticking with Void if I can, and the Void multi-unite cards in this set are really cool and really encourages me to stick with that. So I like that. I mean, I'll change it up sometimes with different factions, but I like that if I want to, I can stick with Void, and it actually gives me rewards for doing so, whereas in the past, I feel like really only the Mechana faction got those kind of bonuses. I mean, yeah, you had other cards that said, especially with Lifebound, that said if you played another Lifebound hero, you'd get something this turn, but not like this. This really encourages you to stick with the faction, and I like that. So I like how it uses in different ways, like the one card that says that if you multi-unite, you get to banish more cards from your hand and to acquire more cards, or some of them, like some of the Void ones, just say that you get more attack power. The Lifebound says you get more honor. I like that. I like the different ideas and concepts of how that works. So going back to the artwork, I will take credit where credit is due. The artwork has improved greatly, especially going from the last couple sets, the last block, Rise of Vigil and Darkness Unleashed, through to this one. The guy has definitely improved. I feel like he's taken a lot of the criticism that he's gotten for his artwork and has tried to make efforts to make it look better, more professional, and I really appreciate that. Do I love it? Do I think it's fantastic? No. But if this was the first Ascension set I ever saw, let's say that this was the Ascension, this was the base game, and I saw this artwork, I wouldn't have anything bad to say about it. I wouldn't really criticize it. I would probably say, the artwork is kind of cool. I mean, some of the cards are kind of cool. Yeah, moving on. That's how I'd feel about it, and that's a huge step up. So, at this point, I'm not going to make a huge issue. If he keeps it up like this, I'm not going to make a huge issue of the art anymore. I promise. I've totally bashed it before. I still hate Sentinels of the Multiverse art, and they haven't improved that, but maybe they should take a lesson and actually consider making incremental changes to that artwork as well. Not much else I can say about this. I really enjoyed it. I think that if you're new to Ascension, if you're watching this video because you're kind of been interested in it and you want to see, how much the game has been changing over time, this is a really good set to jump on board with, to actually start going into Ascension, because there's not, even though there's some new stuff here, it's still not that hard a game to teach. If Ascension might be less, like 5 minutes to teach, this might add another minute of teaching how the new stuff works. So, and it's all works together really well. I would also say, well, Rise of Vigil for me personally is still my favorite base set, because I really enjoy the energy mechanic, and I thought there's just some cooler cards in that set, if my memory serves. But the transform mechanic in this one, like what was in Darkness Unleashed, man, it's a tough call. I would go with either of them. Rise of Vigil or this one, really good choices for a starting off point. I'm having less and less reason to ever delve back into the original set, Chronicle of the Godslayer, and the original expansion to that, Revenge of the Fallen. I really have very little reason to pull those cards out now, because every expansion since then, including Storm of Souls and Immortal Heroes, have been better. Bigger, better, more new, unique stuff. Really love the direction they're going in with this game. Still one of my favorite deck builders. Ascension, Realms Unraveled, good set to start with. My name is Nick, this has been Board Game Brawl, and I'm reminding you to get out there and game every day in every way. Take care.